Medical scientists worldwide are encouraging people to eat more fish. Most American diets are low in cold water fish that are abundant in important omega-3 oils. DHA and EPA are the vital components of fish oil that provide healthy benefits. Not only are they crucial for brain and vision development, they're very important for cardiovascular health. Carlson, America's leading Norwegian fish oil brand, specializes in both great-tasting soft gels that are easy to swallow and fish oil liquids that don't taste fishy. That's right, Carlson provides the most extensive line of fish oils to meet all your needs. You can take Carlson fish oils with confidence, for Carlson fish oils are tested for purity, potency, and freshness. Ask for Carlson Norwegian fish oils today. That's right, ask for Carlson Norwegian fish oils today.
Friends, take care of your skin using Aloe juice and skin gel. My dry, troubled skin felt better right away. It's my #1 choice for beautiful and healthy skin. Using Aloe juice, skin gel, and lotion starts soothing and renewing dry skin and oily skin on contact, easing irritations on cracking skin too. Aloe skin gel is the best therapy without a prescription, feeling soft and smooth, balancing, feeling youthful. Use Aloe products including skin gel, sold nationally at your favorite natural food store and pharmacy. Online, find a store near you at aloelife.com or call Aloe 1-800-414-ALOE. That's 1-800-414-2563. Look and feel your best with Aloe.
Welcome to Here's to Your Health with Joshua Lane. Here's to Your Health discusses the current thinking in wellness, bringing you the most influential thinkers in beauty, fitness, and longevity. Your host, Joshua Lane, was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that helped bring wheatgrass sprouts and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health, Joshua Lane.
Welcome to this edition of Here's to Your Health. I'm your host, Josh Lane. The other day, the cartoonist for the New Yorker, George Booth, well loved by many generations, passed away at the age of 96 years old. As it turns out, one of my good friends happened to be very friendly with George Booth and his wife, and that's my friend Christopher McQUALE, who's with us today. Chris, thanks for your time. I appreciate you speaking about George this way.
Oh, well, my pleasure. It's a great subject, and I think what prompted this was that I wrote a little memorial or something, whatever you call it, about him, and copied Josh on it, and started out thinking that I would just read the article, but I feel as though probably better just to speak to what was in my mind when I wrote that.
Absolutely. So you met George Booth, when you were a very young man? When did you first bump into George?
In my mid-20s, and I was living in Huntington on Long Island, and his mother-in-law went to the church that I went to. And George and his wife, Dion, used to come and visit her once in a while, and I remembered them from that, but I never really got to know them there. What happened was that years later, now married and career change and 2 children living further out on the island in Smithtown, we joined a church that was further out near Stony Brook, which is State University there. And they were, George and Dion were members there. So our wives became friendly, and we started, we were parenting, so, not much free time. And so but we had them over. And at the time, I really didn't know anything about George. I didn't know that he was a cartoonist. But he was illustrating a children's book called Possum Come a Knockin', and he brought a copy of it with him, and ended up reading it to my sons and signed, so a hardbound copy, and signed it, and that sort of began something very, curious, and we could already tell they were already very zany sort of folks that weren't really operating under the normal restrictions of society, and so we got along well on that basis. And then we decided to get out of New York, and we moved. That is my wife and my two sons, and a few goats, and a cat and a dog. We decided to move to Virginia, Central Virginia, near Charlottesville, and so we lost touch with them because we didn't have the kind of relationship where we would talk on the phone and even write letters. It was really just real time, get together and tell stories, a lot of stories. And George is filled with stories, and he's very good at telling them. So a little bit about what I've learned about George, and we'll share. He's born in 1926, same year as my mother. And he went into the Marines, but was at the tail end of World War II, so he didn't really see any action there. And then he said, but he grew up in the Midwest, in Missouri. And one of the first stories he told me was that while he was back home working on the farm, the family farm, he got a call from a bunch of his Marine buddies who'd come to town and invited him, to come in and see them at a bar. Well, George and Dion did not drink, and he was raised in a family that didn't drink alcohol. And so, but he went in because he wanted to see his friends, and they more or less coerced him into having a few drinks, which went straight to his head. And he stumbled out the back of the bar, unseen by others, and passed out in the alleyway.
Right.
And a kind citizen, seeing him lying there, came by, put a block of wood under his head to keep his head off the damp cobblestones. And then someone noticed who it was, someone from town, and called his father, who drove into town and picked him up. And by this time, he was at least able to stand with support. And so he got into the truck, and groaning and whatnot, not feeling particularly well. After about a few minutes of driving, his father said, "Well, George, I guess you won't do that again."
Right.
And he never did, which is just, again, it's just a curious story about a man who somewhat, usually you associate odd behavior with odd habits, and I guess he may have had a few, but he's really quite a straightforward, normal guy. At any rate, he wrote what he called gags, cartoons, for a military publication. I forget the name of it. And then when he got out, he didn't really have a college education, but he decided that he really wanted to stay with being an artist in the sense of producing the cartoons that he had developed an interest and taste for. And eventually ended up at the New Yorker, which is not an easy client to become popular or even be recognized. So he started with them, I'm guessing somewhere in the late 50s. He said that he was with them for over 50 years.
Wow.
And since he just died, that would, you can do the math there.
Well, our guest is Chris McQUALE, who had the great pleasure of having a long-term friendship with George Booth. George Booth, really possibly the most well-known cartoonist in the New Yorker, as Chris just mentioned, for 50 years, and the New Yorker known worldwide for the quality of their cartoons for sure, and for their short stories and their commentary. And so when you and your wife would hang out with George and his wife, now obviously he was really of your mom and dad's generation, so were you just very deferential? How do you chat with someone and hang out with someone who's really of your parents' generation?
Well, go into another story about how that this is a story that Dion told, that George backed up. And that was when they first met. She decided that he needed full-time attention. She was going to devote all of her energy towards capturing this guy. Handsome guy, tall, low Louisiana drawl. I'm not Louisiana, sorry, Missouri drawl. And she told a story of how when she first went over to his apartment. At that time, he was living in Cold Spring Harbor in Huntington. And she went into his bedroom, and the two of them ended up jumping up and down on his bed, like a couple of kids. And afterwards, he was asked by his landlord if he would vacate the premises at his earliest opportunity.
Right.
Well, in answer to your question, I would say that they were really quite young and up until the end. And if the New Yorker produced a documentary about 25, 28 minutes long, all about him, if you choose, it's out there on YouTube. And they were continuing. The last recordings of them were the two of them talking like a couple of teenagers that are still just falling in love.
Very nice.
And so that it made it very easy. There was no age difference as far. I mean, I've always really enjoyed older people anyway. I've always felt like people my generation were not on the same wavelength as myself. I mean, with obvious exceptions. That was my wife, but
right.
So that's that with his agelessness, and I really think that that's what kept him going with new ideas. Was he was always looking for some kind of new idea. And what happened was that years later, after my children are grown and gone to college and out in the world, and I'm divorced and I retired, I decided to move in with a friend in Brooklyn and have the New York experience. And I immediately searched out what George was up to. Hadn't seen him in years, and found out he was living a 10-minute bike ride away from me in Brooklyn. So I rode over and we started hanging out. And we just sit around sometimes when we go out. And then once in a while we would go to, I would take him. I had a car as well, an old Saab that he really liked. It was really funky and old torn leather seats. And so we drive over to a Christian Science church meeting, which is again how we met. And neither of us were particularly religious, but we liked the atmosphere. And he would get up during testimony and tell a story about something. And he'd had enough. His mother-in-law was a Christian Science practitioner, and his wife had been raised, as a Christian Scientist. So that was really something that he enjoyed, that we enjoyed together. But the other thing was, I said to him in a conversation that he needed new material. I was really just teasing him, but at the time I belonged to the Park Slope Natural Food Co-op, which boasted itself to be the oldest, longest, continually running co-ops in the world. And I took him there so he could meet some of the odd characters that shop there, and there was plenty of them. And so I took him in, and he had to sign in because it's very strict. You can't, if you don't belong to the co-op, you can't shop there. So he had to have a guest pass, and I took him upstairs, and we stood online, and it was his turn. And this lovely young 30-year-old woman asked him for ID. He gave it to her, and she looked at it, and she said, George Booth, is that really you? And he says, well, that's what they tell me. And so everyone laughed. Everybody standing around, everyone seemed to know who George Booth was. So she gave him the pass, and we went into the co-op, and he got to experience a lot of interesting Brooklyn characters, as well as people that come from far away, Hoboken, Bronx, Staten Island.
Right.
So there was that.
So now his association with our guest is Chris McQUALE, and Chris had the good fortune to be friends with George Booth, the cartoonist most associated with the New Yorker, and spent more than 50 years working for the New Yorker, doing some very important work for them, including when 9/11 happened. The following week, really no one knew what to do at that point with the disaster that happened to New York City and to the United States. But they actually ran one George Booth, I'll use the word cartoon or gag, that seemed very appropriate, not sentimental, but just very appropriate. So George Booth seemed to have the ability to strike an intelligent chord as a cartoonist, and people really liked his work. He seems to have had a lot of influence. And again, my friend Chris McQUALE is telling us about his experience with George. Now, when George would ride around in your Saab, was he a fan of Saabs? Did he have a car that he liked himself?
Not that I know of. I don't remember having that. He could have, but he just liked the idea of an old car, and that it was kind of, as they say, the leather was worn and torn. And what's important is that really, I'm really quite surprised that there are a lot of people who are not familiar with his name, but have seen his cartoons. So I would say to your audience, if you're not familiar, just, Google his name. He did over 20 on the cover of the New Yorker, and then lots of gags inside. So and he has themes of crazy looking dogs and cats and couples arguing and stuff like that. It's really cool.
Right. And Chris, what was that video that you said was just posted by the New Yorker that you'd like to recommend?
Oh, if you just type in documentary George Booth, it'll come up, and there's several versions of it. I mean, in other words, sources Vimeo but YouTube has one. New Yorker, that's what I like, the one on YouTube, easiest to access and everything. So.
Well, that sounds real good. I'd like to thank my friend Chris McQUALE for speaking with us today about his good friend George Booth and his wife Dionne. And George was a cartoonist for the New Yorker for more than 50 years, and had a lot of influence with his lovely, subtle, Midwestern humor. This is Josh Lane. You're listening to Here's to Your Health. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after these important.
Have you had your Carlson Norwegian fish oil today? Decades ago, scientists discovered why Greenland Eskimos maintain healthy hearts despite their high-fat diets. The high level of omega-3 oils in their seafood diet protected their hearts. Carlson Norwegian fish oil provides those important omega-3 oils. The same omega-3s from cold water fish support maximum brain power, immune strength, joint comfort, and our vision too. Carlson, the very finest fish oil, is a valuable source of the important omega-3s, EPA and DHA. Each teaspoon provides a full 1,600 milligrams of omega-3s. And its purity is guaranteed. Try it on salads and popcorn. It tastes like lemon, not fishy. Ask for Carlson, the very finest fish oil, at finer health food stores today.
Hi friends, Monica Brandt here for Aloe Life, #1 in aloe vera. As a professional international athlete for over 30 years, between track, ninja, and fitness, I want to remind you of daily exercise plus Aloe Life, my daily wake up to look and feel your best. Aloe Life products boosted victory for me in 2016, winning first place World's European Union figure. See AloeLife.com athletes. Plus workouts are easier too with Aloe Life products for digestion, energy, and stamina for success, or even dropping weight. It's so easy, friends, to choose a winning team. Aloe Gold or Detox Plus with certified organic daily green superfoods by Aloe Life. Be your own best athlete with Aloe Life products that work fast. AloeLife.com or 1-800-414-ALOE. Choose Aloe Life today, friends. I'm glad I did. This is Monica Brandt, Fitness Olympia champion and fan of Aloe Life for over 10 years. Aloe Life since 1991.
Welcome to this edition of Here's to Your Health. I'm your host, Josh Lane. Recently, there has been discussion of the use of fluoride in water, which we have been putting in the American water supply, I think, since 1951, when there was studies done at Kingston, Poughkeepsie, New York, about the value of fluoridation, which, as I understand it, were never completed, and they started putting fluoride in the water. And so the whole use of fluoride is very controversial. But if you have friends and family say, gee, we think fluoride's not a good idea in the water, they look at you as though like, oh dear, there's something wrong with you. And they don't really realize that in Europe, the advanced industrial nations of Europe, the Germans, the Swedes, the Danes, the Finns, the English, the French, no one fluoridates their water. And as soon as you tell your family and friends that, they think, oh, we did not know that. So the use of fluoride is used in America, but other advanced industrial nations don't use it, don't feel it has any value. So today we have Dr. Richard Fischer on, and Dr. Fischer is a dentist, a graduate of Georgetown University School of Dentistry. And Dr. Fischer there at the Georgetown University School of Dentistry had the honor of serving as clinical instructor for the Department of Dental Materials. And Dr. Fischer currently is serving on the faculty for the American College of Integrative Medicine and Dentistry. And by the way, he is an expert witness, Dr. Fischer, and he was the first dentist invited to serve as an expert witness before Congress in 2002, in 2004, and in 2008, where he testified on potential health and environmental risks associated with the use of mercury in dental fillings. And aside from testifying before Congress on multiple occasions, Dr. Fischer has also been called to testify for numerous other governmental organizations, including the National Institute of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Academy of Sciences, and the U.S. State Department. Dr. Richard Fischer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Very happy to have you on the show. So you are a practicing dentist. And so where did you receive your undergraduate degree?
I did undergrad at Georgetown as well, as the same place I went to dental school later.
And so now, as a practicing dentist, you seem to be among the small number of men and women who are dentists who feel that a lot of things that mainstream dentistry is doing are not really necessarily the best for the American people. So now, why has fluoridation suddenly emerged as a mainstream topic of discussion?
Well, the good answer to that question is because there was a big lawsuit that was going on for 7 years that just got settled about 2 months ago about this. Now, in full disclosure, I stopped using fluoride in my practice around 1980. So I kind of knew there was a problem there. The research was out there. And at that time, most of the problems were bone and joint problems that we knew about. The studies were out there showing that people who were exposed to fluoride in the doses that we're used to seeing had much higher rates of arthritic problems, what they call crippling fluorosis, which infects the skeleton. There was about a 7-fold increase in one study in New Jersey by the EPA of osteosarcoma, which is a deadly cancer of bone in males between the ages of 10 and 19 if they were drinking fluoridated water. So there were a lot of problems with fluoride early on, but what brought it to a head, there was a Congress about 8 years ago. The Toxic Substances Control Act was modified, and so it allowed citizens to bring a suit against the EPA if they were concerned about a toxic substance that were being exposed to. And so that began this lawsuit, which went on for 7 years. And using the data from the National Toxicology Program, they found that even at the levels of fluoride in the water, which have been reduced over the years by EPA from originally when I was first started practicing, the levels allowed were 1.2 to 4 parts per million. In 2015, I think they reduced it to 0.7 parts per million to 1.2. And so even at 0.7, which is what this lawsuit dealt with, the people getting that level, they find that children and infants and women who were exposed to this, who were pregnant, the children had a substantial drop in IQ.
Wow.
And that's kind of what started this whole thing of late. The physical things we knew about, the cancer rates and all that stuff, but it was never enough for the EPA or the ADA to back off. So thankfully, this lawsuit just started something, and what kind of brought it even more to a head last week is that Dr. Joseph Ladapo, who's the Surgeon General of Florida, made an announcement publicly that he felt that continuing fluoridation of the water was a public health malpractice. And so he was the first one of the states to bring that out. So the EPA now has to make they can't ignore it anymore. They've ignored it for 40 years. And I knew a lot of the early EPA scientists who were trying to get this to happen. But there's always a layer above scientists in these health agencies of bureaucrats. And the scientists were suing EPA back in the 80s when I knew these guys. They were patients of mine, a lot of them. And they were bringing lawsuits against EPA, but the bureaucrats stifled it. The ADA was of no help either, the American Dental Association. But that's what brought it to a head now, and why it's kind of hit the news. And now the EPA can't ignore this anymore. For 40 years, they've ignored it. And now they got to do something.
Wow. Our guest is Dr. Richard Fischer. Dr. Richard Fischer is a dentist, a graduate of the Georgetown University School of Dentistry, and is very important in wellness ideas. And we're discussing fluoridation, which now all of a sudden is being discussed in the mainstream as causing tremendous health problems. Although, Dr. Fischer, I do notice in the mainstream, mostly the comedians on late night shows, etc., they're mostly just smirking. There's a lot of smirking, as though Robert F. Kennedy is just, I don't know, a boob. That if you don't believe in fluoridation, you're just a dunce. And that seems not to have changed. I remember that when I was a young man, they thought you were a dunce if you that. And now so guys like you are talking about it, scientists such as yourself are talking about it, but really the mainstream comedians, I mention them because they seem to have a lot of clout in America. They still are acting as though, oh my goodness, these people, maybe they're well-intentioned, but they're just bozos.
Well, there's an old saying that what you're not up on, you tend to be down on.
Right.
And we've been fighting that same sort of opinion for 40 years. People are entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts.
Right.
And now the facts have become much more mainstream, and I think you're going to start seeing changes. This is only 2 months again since this judge made the ruling. And again, with God bless him, Joe Ladapo in Florida, who I know him pretty well, he was the first one that took this the next step, where he said in Florida, he doesn't have the authority to ban the use of fluoride in the water, but he said it's malpractice to do so now. And the EPA nationally has to make some changes in how they're going to regulate this thing. So you're going to see some changes in attitudes pretty soon.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that. And I do notice that when the mainstream talks about fluoridation, they never say that the advanced industrial Western European nations do not fluoridate their water. That would take them 30 seconds. I've never heard them say that.
Right. They don't want to say that. They have an opinion, and the inertia of these people is, like I say, I've been dealing with this for 40 years since I stopped using it. And I didn't know if I'd ever see this happen in my lifetime.
Right.
But after 50 years of practice, I am just welcoming this change. And, you have someone like Bobby Kennedy, who I also know. He is leading this from if he gets through the Senate confirmation, and I think he will. I mean, he is a brilliant man and heartfelt and is wanting to improve the health of this country, and I think he'll do it if they give him a half a chance.
All righty. Our guest is Dr. Richard Fischer. Dr. Fischer is a practicing dentist, graduate of the Georgetown University School of Dentistry. So once again, Dr. Fischer, what is the downside risk to using fluoride?
Great question. I've always told my patients for the last 40 some years since I stopped using it, 45 years almost, that you always have to look at the risk-benefit ratio of anything you do, whether it's surgery, whether it's a medication. The proposed benefit of those proponents who think that fluoride in drinking water or applied topically to the teeth reduces tooth decay will, according to their estimates, it would prevent 1/2 of a cavity per child. So
Wow.
That's the potential benefit. It probably doesn't do that, but let's just assume,
Right.
for the sake of argument, we accept that proposal. On the downside, you have a loss of 3 to 5 points of IQ. You have an increase, again, 7-fold of osteosarcoma rates in male children. You have all sorts of reducing of the immune system's effect, bone problems, skeletal problems, and now we know neuropsychiatric and neurological problems in the developing brain in young children. So the risk-benefit ratio I never thought was there, even before we know about the IQ stuff probably for the last 20 years. A lot of studies coming out of China, I was seeing those. But even before that, like I say, there was enough there that there was no benefit-risk ratio that was acceptable for me to use in my practice or in my family.
Our guest is Dr. Richard Fischer. Dr. Fischer is a practicing dentist, a graduate of the Georgetown University School of Dentistry. Dr. Fischer, where does the fluoride that we pump into the water supply and put into our toothpastes, where does that fluoride, what's the origin of that fluoride?
Yeah, good question. It used to be when I was much younger that they would mine it from the bauxite mining as a mining residue. And bauxite was what they used to make aluminum. So they used to get it from the aluminum mining industry. Then later on, they found there was a cheaper way to get it. And you had these smokestacks, like in Tampa Bay, they had these smokestacks. And they would use the scrubbers to get the residue from inside the smokestacks. And they started using these silica fluorides and sodium silicic acid. These things are not only, they had fluoride in it, but they had radioactive nucleotides, they have all sorts of hazardous chemicals. And they started using this in the water because they could, the scrubbers had to sell it off as toxic waste. They couldn't bury it. They were burying the bauxite and stuff. So they got a cheaper way of it, which is a much more hazardous, form of fluoride.
Wow.
And fluoride is, the other thing that fluoride does, even in any form, when you get into the body, the body has one of the things that keeps us healthy is the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland requires iodine for it to function properly, and that regulates your metabolism. Iodine, fluoride, and bromine are all halogens. So when people are exposed to fluoride, it's a much more active halide than iodine. So when you get exposed to fluoride, it tends to suppress your thyroid function, which can lead to a whole cascade of metabolic and health problems down the road. So regardless of what form you get it at, none of it's too good for you. It's not it's a naturally occurring thing on Earth, but there's no metabolic need for it.
Right. Our guest is Dr. Richard Fischer. Dr. Fischer is a dentist, practicing dentist, is a graduate of the Georgetown University School of Dentistry. Dr. Fischer, having just mentioned the terrible downside to using fluoride and the sources, the polluted sources that they use, which seems like really a very bad idea, are these people who are producing fluoride products, are they concerned about liability and culpability?
That's a good question. I don't think thus far there have been any suits that I've heard of. But again, once you change the landscape a little bit, like what's happening on after this lawsuit, the EPA has got to make some changes, and they have a variety of things. I mean, they can stop putting it in the water supply, number one. You still have other exposures, from toothpaste, mouthwashes, and so forth. And, canned foods, are processed with fluoridated water for the most part. So I think once you stop the fluoridation process, if they do that, then, we're all going to be in a lot better shape. But if they don't, then individuals may be, liable. Companies that produce products that have fluoride in them. But I'm no lawyer, but I can imagine there could be some repercussions down that route.
Our guest is Dr. Richard Fischer. Dr. Fischer is a dentist, a practicing dentist who, since early 1980s, has stopped using fluoride in his practice and has a booming practice, by the way, in the Washington D.C. area. I'm asking you to predict the future now. This is always a tough question. Do you feel now, as a mature man who's watched America change its attitude towards food and health and healing, and the attitude now is much better than it was when you were a young man in your 20s? I'm guessing that when you were a young man in your 20s, people would just laugh if you told them you're opposed to fluoride or you want to eat fruits and vegetables without sprays on them. They thought you were just, a silly person. And do you feel now that suddenly, for whatever reason, things have really changed and that these ideas have a real shot at becoming mainstream?
Yeah, and I think that in large part they already have. I think the change has been dramatic since this whole presidential, cycle with people like Bobby getting into the mix. From hearing it.
I think so. We have simply run out of time. Our guest has been Dr. Richard Fischer, the dentist, important dentist, graduate of Georgetown University School of Dentistry. Have to have him back on. I'm happy to say that Scott Tips, the president of the National Health Federation, recommended Dr. Fischer give the interview on the show today. I'd like to shout out to Scott. And this is an important topic, and maybe it's very possible that the health of the American people over the next few years will get much better. This is Josh Lane. You're listening to Here's to Your Health. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back after these important messages.
Medical scientists worldwide are encouraging people to eat more fish. Most American diets are low in cold water fish that are abundant in important omega-3 oils. DHA and EPA are the vital components of fish oil that provide healthy benefits. Not only are they crucial for brain and vision development, they're very important for cardiovascular health. Carlson, America's leading Norwegian fish oil brand, specializes in both great-tasting soft gels that are easy to swallow and fish oil liquids that don't taste fishy. That's right, Carlson provides the most extensive line of fish oils to meet all your needs. You can take Carlson fish oils with confidence, for Carlson fish oils are tested for purity, potency, and freshness. Ask for Carlson Norwegian fish oils today. That's right, ask for Carlson Norwegian fish oils today.
Friends, say goodbye to rough, dry, and troubled skin. Even acne scars fade with AlloLife Skin Gel by AlloLife, not over-processed. So look for the dark yellow color, like the ancients wrote about, that gets to work fast in 5 minutes to 45 days. Skin Gel for more beautiful skin by AlloLife. Call 800-414-ALOE. That's 800-414-ALLO. An A-plus Better Business Bureau company. Skin gel available at Whole Foods, Clark's, Natural Grocers, other quality stores, plus allolife.com. 800-414-ALLO. That's 800-414-ALOE. AlloLife, aloe vera. For you, 800-414-ALLO. Do something good for yourself. Zoom into the new year. Leaders in health products since 1991. AlloLife, for a healthier life.
Welcome to this edition of Here's to Your Health. I'm your host, Josh Lane. As yoga has become so popular these days among professional athletes in the National Football League, baseball players, dancers, performers, people recognize the importance of motion, and yoga is considered an important system, possibly the most important system. I'll use the word for physical fitness, to view it simply as a way that we can keep ourselves healthy. Of course, there's many other components. And my guest is Matthew Darling, and Matthew has the incredible advantage of having spent 10 years in India studying with Pattabhi Jois. Pattabhi Jois is considered by many people to be among a handful of teachers of yoga of renown. Matthew Darling, welcome to Here's to Your Health.
Thank you, Josh. It's great to be with you. Always a joy.
Thank you. Very happy to have you on the show. And obviously, yoga is very important as I'll use the word physical fitness. I'm not trying to diminish yoga. Obviously, there's a great deal going on there, but on physical fitness aspect. And really, I read that you had studied again with Pattabhi Jois in India for 10 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, not consistently. I'd have to go back and forth a few times to earn a little bit of money and renew my visa.
Right.
But yes, over the course of a 10-year time, we spent time together, and it was just an amazing opportunity in my life, that education that I got from him.
Now, Pattabhi Jois is again a very, very important, I'll use the word teacher of yoga. How did you first learn about Pattabhi Jois?
Well, Pattabhi Jois was first introduced to me by a teacher in Crestone, Colorado. And I'd been studying yoga in this specific Ashtanga yoga system for probably 4 years. And it had gotten to the point where I'd gone to so many of the teachers that were his students and teaching in America that at one point, this teacher, Annie Pace, she said to me, "It's time for you now to go seek this man out." And she gave me a photograph of him. And within 6 months, I prepared and gotten myself together to go take that journey to Mysore, India, and to study with him.
Wow. So, and you pronounce his name Pattabhi Jois?
Yes, Jois.
Pattabhi Jois. Now, what is the type of yoga that he teaches?
Well, the great opportunity that I had was that the exposure to the setting in which he taught it in India was just such a complimentary introduction to and understanding and education of the system. The system of Ashtanga Yoga, which Ashtanga Yoga means 8 limbs. Ashta means 8 and Anga means limbs. It's a specific name that's given to a teaching of Patanjali, which is the Yoga Sutras. The affirmations of Patanjali is a whole study in itself. But of the 8 limbs, Pattabhi Jois got us to understand that we were mainly entering in practicing like what you described with the physical part with athletes and people getting healthy physically is the 3rd limb, which is called asana, the postures. And so we were refining our understanding of the 3rd limb. And in that process, he would help us to understand that we're refining our relationship to the self, to understanding the true nature of the self, and purifying our nervous system and gaining mastery over our sense organs. So through that process of the physical access to the practice, then we would refine the first two limbs, are the yamas and the niyamas, which are moral and ethical sublimbs that branch off into 5 yamas and 5 niyamas to help us morally and ethically relate to how we're living our lives, how we're approaching and understanding relationship, all the different facets and the full spectrum of living. And that refining process comes through what's called trishtana, is the actions that we perform in the breathing, a very specific type of breathing, and the gazing point, and then the physical action of the imprint of the breath, the physical breath, not just the air of the specific type of breathing, but the physical breath on how we're doing the postures in sequence, mainly starting with what's very commonly known as the sun salutations. So beginning with that system and then progressing through specific systems that Pattabhi Jois taught us in sequence, and one posture complementing the next, this giving us the access to progress gradually as he would oversee us. And then he would individually prescribe to us how we were to relate to the fullness of the system. It wasn't, he really got clear on seeing into our individual needs and prescribed us the amount, and was very respectful with understanding as to how we progressed.
Wow. Our guest is Matthew Darling, and Matthew is a senior teacher of Ashtanga Yoga in Santa Barbara, having studied directly with Pattabhi Jois. Pattabhi Jois, who is really among, I would say a handful, but maybe it's just really 2 or 3.
Pattabhi Jois, or as we lovingly call them, Guruji, the guru meaning somebody who's guiding you to the light from darkness, and the G on the end is showing reverence or respect. Oh. So we call them Guruji, a very common time-honored tradition. You're not going to use that term with any Westerners. But in the West, he's probably been one of the most influential systems, the Ashtanga system, to the more hybrid styles of yoga that have come out, people developing what's called vinyasa classes. Vinyasa really has its foundation and roots more so in the Ashtanga system, which means that you're mindfully transferring energy from one place to the next. And we use the breath to do that, the inhale and the exhale. And we're, like you'd mentioned that, you know, the physical aspects of the benefits of yoga, and there are so many, but, you know, on the subtle aspects of, you know, just the imprint of the breath along the central axis of the body, the patterning of the breath on the spinal column that houses all of our nerves is so beneficial if we're paying attention to it. It gives the mind a place of concentration and awareness, and the opportunity to settle the mind, which is very complementary to the nervous system. And it also gives us this sense of awareness as to how we're bilaterally using the body on both sides. And that's just so complementary to getting skillful. Because yoga, the basic definition of yoga as it is in the scriptures, as it is in the Bhagavad Gita, means skill and action. So how skillfully are we taking on our acts today? And it's a nice thing to start out with in the morning. I've been practicing yoga for 30 years, but I started with Pattabhi Jois 25 years ago. And I was just thinking recently how I get up before the sun every day to welcome with veneration that process through this practice that he introduced me to. And it's so key to the flow and the rhythm of my day that I'm connecting with not only the nature and the respect to this ball of fire that gives us life, but to the intention that I'm setting for myself as I go forward. And so that refining of that skill and awareness of how we're living our lives, how we're responsibly using ourselves physically, even just in our stillness and quiet of the practice, how we gather our thoughts and gives us that filter, that opportunity to how we choose to use our words that give meaning to our life. So it's a very powerful yet subtle system.
Yes, I think so. Our guest is Matthew Darling, a teacher of Ashtanga Yoga, and a very important system of yoga, widely used by many athletes here in the United States and around the world. And may I ask, how many hours a day did you practice in India?
Well, we would start early, 3:30, 4 a.m., and he would go through a group of people we would queue up. And at the time, in his small yoga shala, which shala means home, he actually taught out of his home. We would practice 12 people at a time in the room, and he would work with us individually. We were all at our own pace. That's called the Mysore style, where he works with the people individually in a group setting. So we're lending to the collective energy of the group, but yet we're respecting where we all are at individually and doing that amount. And so he'd go through, maybe 100 or so people at the time. It was just taking wing in the late 90s. And it's grown a lot more today, and his grandson is teaching, 500 people at a time now. It's pretty big, as yoga has grown since then. But yeah, we would start out and practice with him in the morning, and just take our time. We were living this lifestyle where we were submerged in the culture of India. So we would do that practice in the morning, go get some food, hang out in the community with the people from all over the world that we were meeting, swap stories, try and stay respectful as to, what was being taught, and not try to confuse things, which happens from time to time, and it can with people taking their individual experiences and kind of getting fundamentalist with it. But overall, just the recognition that he was prescribing us something individually special. And then we would, go through our day, maybe take a nap, maybe go through the town of Mysore, which was a very old town and had like nice markets and the palace, beautiful places to go to. And then in the afternoon, at that time, we would do a conference, and we would come back and we were allowed to ask questions. And for me, that was the most interesting part, because here I am, I've traveled, halfway around the world, and I'm sitting there, and, you realize you're seeking this understanding, and you go so far, and you're sitting there at the feet of this teacher, and you just realize, the truth is within me. This powerful person that I'm that's placed in front of me, that I've come to seek. I'm at the well, I'm right at the fountain, and I just come to realize that, he's helping me to see within myself that I have the truth to this stuff. I just have to refine my relationship and my understanding of it. And that's the biggest gift. I call yoga for myself. It can offer you, like I said, all these physical things, but it's like spiritual hygiene to me. It's this daily, like brushing of my teeth or washing of my hair. It's this daily grooming that prepares me, prepares the vessel to receive and to also give, to be of service.
Wow. Our guest is Matthew Darling, a senior instructor of Ashtanga Yoga, having studied directly with Pattabhi Jois. Matthew, how can the listeners of Here's to Your Health contact you and take your yoga classes, I guess online, but also in Santa Barbara?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I appreciate you giving me that space to inform people. I am you can find me on the internet, MatthewDarling.yoga. It's not a .com, it's .yoga. It's a interesting thing that I came upon that you can use that. But yeah, MatthewDarling.yoga is his website. And then that'll direct you to where I'm teaching locally here in Santa Barbara. I teach at Yoga Soup, which is a beautiful community. Just a great, kind of like it is. It's like a soup, it's like a lot of different styles, thrown into the pot, stirred up, and it's got a great taste to it. It really has a wonderful aroma, fabulous people. Eddie, who started it, is just such a special person in our community, and really embraces the overall spirit and, just the joy of the yoga practice.
Well, that sounds good. So that's Yoga Soup in Santa Barbara. Our guest is Matthew Darling, a senior instructor of Ashtanga Yoga, having studied directly with Pattabhi Jois, which is, I want to mention that because he was a very influential teacher frankly, an enormously important teacher. Matthew, do me a favor, once again, give us the contact info so we can contact you directly.
Certainly. Thank you, Josh. It's MATHEWDARLING.yoga. And I teach at Yoga Soup in Santa Barbara. And the classes that I teach are in the tradition as I learned it in Mysore. Right now, I have 2 days a week. I owned a yoga school in Michigan in the Detroit area for 17 years, and I taught every day, just like Pattabhi Jois taught, except for Saturdays and moon days. So the full moon and the new moon, we don't practice just because of the high and the low energy of it and the opportunity that might come in the subtle body to be injured in that process of high and low. And so, yes, I teach on Mondays and Wednesdays there right now. And I hope to, grow my practice. I've been living here in Santa Barbara for 4 years, and we've got a steady group. And, I'm very enthusiastic, and I still, arise early in the morning to do my practice before I teach. I feel it's very important for me to align myself in that way. And then I work with the students, and like I've mentioned, it's a prescribed amount of the practice. I love introducing people to the foundation of it. And it can be just so beneficial at the simplest entry level. You can find great benefits.
That sounds good. Matthew, once again, our guest is Matthew Darling, senior teacher of Ashtanga Yoga, having studied directly with Pattabhi Jois in India at his center. This is very important. Pattabhi Jois, a very influential, possibly the most influential of all the yoga teachers. Matthew, once again, what is your contact info?
Contact is MATHEWDARLING.yoga. And I teach at Yoga Soup in Santa Barbara, California.
Thank you very much. Our guest has been Matthew Darling. A very good conversation from someone, a senior teacher, a senior student of Pattabhi Jois, having studied with him directly in India for 10 years. This is Josh Lane. You're listening to Here's to Your Health. We take a short break, and we'll be right back after these important messages.
The latest from the greatest, the best in new music by classic rockers, with your host, the insane Daryl Wayne.
This is Alice Cooper, and if Daryl Wayne is insane, what does that make me? Criminally insane. Stick around to find out.
Many of the artist interviews for the latest from the greatest have been captured on audiobook. There is a Volume 1 and Volume 2. Great information and conversations with people in the industry and people surrounded by the industry, and of course the rock stars themselves.
I'm the Reverend Al Green, and you're listening to the insane Daryl Wayne. And I said Wayne Insane.
You can find it on Amazon or Blackstone Audio. Search for the latest from the greatest from Daryl Wayne, DARRELL WAYNE.
Hello, this is Weird Al Yankovic, and you're listening to the insane Daryl Wayne, aren't you?
Welcome to Here's to Your Health with Joshua Lane. Here's to Your Health discusses the current thinking in wellness, bringing you the most influential thinkers in beauty, fitness, and longevity. Your host, Joshua Lane, was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that helped bring wheatgrass sprouts and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health, Joshua Lane.